than any other okay, had a little interruption there. More than any other extreme weather event. The study predicts that by the year 2100, the annual death toll could be as high as 97,000 if dramatic cuts in emissions are not achieved. Heat does not impact all populations and communities equally. Low-income individuals, people of color, older adults, children, pregnant women, people with certain pre-existing health conditions, and those laboring outdoors are more susceptible to the adverse health impacts of extreme heat. It is recognized that swift and robust government action is needed to proactively prepare for the rising temperatures and mitigate the corresponding health risks. Among the strategies that should be implemented to promote a comprehensive portfolio of approaches that emphasize equity and practice community participation are policies and programs that reduce heat's negative impacts. With that background, I would now like to introduce our guest speaker, Jane Gilbert, who has achieved a number of firsts. She is not only Miami-Dade County's first chief heat officer, she is also the world's first CHO, according to Time magazine, and as such is also the first woman to hold that title. Jane is working collaboratively across departments, jurisdictions, and sectors within the region to address and mitigate the increasing risks to human health, lives, and livelihoods associated with excessive heat. Prior to joining Mayor Daniela Levine-Cava's leadership team, Jane served as the City of Miami's first Chief Resilience Officer for 4 years. As CRO, Jane led the Climate and Urban Resilience Strategy development and implementation for the City of Miami in partnership with Miami-Dade County and the City of Miami Beach. Jane holds a bachelor's degree in environmental science from Barnard College and an MPA from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. As Eileen mentioned, questions and answers will follow, so please post your questions for Jane in the chat box. And now I'll turn the program over to Jane. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne, and thank you, Legal Women Voters, for having this session today. It is so important as part of my job to make sure that we are informing, the broader statewide issues around extreme heat. And I am just a long-term admirer of the work of the League. So thank you all for your participation. I'm going to share my screen and get it into slideshow mode. 1 second, to slideshow. All right. So, as Adrienne gave such a great introduction, I can go through some of this intro quicker than usual, but extreme heat is the leading weather-related killer in the United States and the world, more than floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, forest fires. If you take the research paper that Adrienne mentioned from the University of Washington and many other indications that our heat-related illnesses and deaths are very underreported, it's more than all of those combined. It is a silent killer because it's not as visual. In a hurricane, you see roofs getting blown off, or a flood, you're seeing a car getting flooded. Forest fires are very visual. This is not, and it doesn't have the damage to property that some of the other weather-related risks have. And as such, we haven't had funding through FEMA and other hazard mitigation funding for extreme heat-related hazards. Luckily, in COP26 in Glasgow in November, the first time that at the international level, they prioritized human lives over property for adaptation and resilience. And so that's something that we need to take here locally. You know, South Florida, all our coastal Florida, and certainly greater Miami is known nationally, internationally for its risks to sea level rise and flooding. But the extreme heat has not been as much on a radar and concern. However, it was really through a countywide survey of our lower income populations. And if everyone could put their screen on mute, it would be helpful. Anyway, what we heard from our low income and marginalized communities is that when it comes to climate change, one of their top concerns, one of the top two concerns is the impacts of extreme heat, both on their health and their checkbooks, their bottom line. So as Adrian mentioned, we're all at risk, but there are certain populations that are more exposed or more sensitive to heat. So those that are more sensitive include young children, pregnant women, older adults, people on certain medications, people with pre-existing conditions, typically heart, lung, diabetes, and there are those that are more exposed. Outside workers being a big one. We have a lot of outside workers here in Florida in the agricultural, landscaping, construction industries, tourism industries. They're highly exposed for obvious reasons. And then those that either don't have air conditioning, which is very few here in Florida, but there are many more who are what we call AC insecure, because they can't afford the utility costs associated with cooling their homes, or their homes are substandard and they have a wall unit that breaks down and they can't afford to replace it, or it's just not putting out enough to keep their room cool. The good news is that most heat-related illnesses and deaths are preventable through good education, through good management strategies. And our risks are increasing. Since this is data from Miami-Dade County, but the Southeast Florida Climate Change Compact created a trend line like this for each of the counties in South Florida. I think it's data that would be easily accessible also for Lee County. But we've had my guess is it's probably pretty similar in Lee County, but we've had an average minimum temperature rise of 2.2 degrees Fahrenheit since 1985. It's continuing to increase. And you know what that's meant historically is that we've had a dramatic increase in the number of days with a heat index over 90 degrees. Now here in Florida, we don't get, or at least South Florida, we don't get temperatures over 100 degrees, but we do get heat indexes far exceeding 100 degrees because of the combination of temperature and humidity. And the humidity makes it harder for us to regulate heat because we can't perspire as much if it's that moist in the air. So what we're going to see by mid-century is dramatic increases in heat indexes of over 100 and over 105. And that's when we get into much more dangerous levels of heat indexes. At 105, we're all at risk with any significant exposure to heat. Currently, we're experiencing about 7 days of that a year. That's gonna likely increase to close to 3 months a year by mid-century. And we're having increases in temperature, not only due to climate change, but to our urban development patterns. So we create urban heat islands by reducing the number of pervious surfaces throughout our urban environment where water gets, instead of being absorbed in vegetation and then evaporated, it gets conveyed
now
underground.
I should unmute the.
Yeah, just see me coughing.
Please mute your connections. Thank you. So it's due to more pervious surfaces. Impervious surfaces. Darker surfaces can absorb a lot of heat, and then just lack of the vegetation and tree canopy, where they further cool both through shade but also evapotranspiration. And that's where we get very unequal levels of heat in our communities. This is a map of Miami-Dade County with census tracts. On the left side is the average median household income, where it's the median household income, not average. But the dark blue is the highest income, the white is the lowest income areas. And on the right is our urban tree canopy, where the dark green is tree canopies over 40%, and our the white blocks are the tree canopies under 10%. And you can see the correlation. And so it again explains why our low-income people are experiencing more heat-related illnesses and deaths. Is they're more exposed, even, and they're paying more for their AC, certainly proportionately. Now, we do mostly have air conditioning. The biggest risk over in the northwest of our country and in Canada last year with the heat dome was that 50% of the population didn't have air conditioning and had extreme temperatures that they weren't accustomed to. But for us, the event of a widespread power outage and extended power outage during hot months can present a big risk. And we saw that with Hurricane Irma in 2017, where 12 people died in a nursing home due to lost power and overheating. Since then, the state has passed a requirement for all assisted living and nursing homes to have backup power with the capacity to keep a community room cool for at least 4 days. But we know that there are a lot more populations that are at risk during this event, including our evacuation shelters here in Miami-Dade County. They have the backup power to keep the lights on, but not to keep the actual shelters cool. And so that is something we're working on. We talked a little bit about the risks at home and substandard housing. That's one of the key things we're seeing. And I think it was put in the chat as well, but the CDC has an environmental public health tracking that you can look at all the different risks that might be also related to homes and heat, including mold. Mold is another big thing in Florida, particularly with our lower income populations. And that's really the combination. With climate change, we get these more intense rainstorms that if you don't have a sealed home, you may get moisture in your home. And then if you're not drying it out well with your air conditioning, you're more susceptible to mold. I mentioned outdoor workers. Outdoor workers are up to, particularly agricultural workers, up to 35 times more likely to have a heat-related illness and death than your average person. This past legislative session in Florida, we had one representative, one state senator, both from Miami-Dade County, on both sides of the aisle in terms of party representation, introduce legislation to protect outdoor workers, because we don't currently, OSHA does not have protections for outdoor workers from heat. They have guidelines, but they don't have requirements. They're looking at it right now, and thanks to our current administration, the state of Florida, Oregon, and Washington have passed statewide protections for outdoor workers, to require employers to provide potable water, access to shade, and required rest times when heat index gets over to a dangerous level, to have some periodic rest times every couple of hours. That's what they tried to do this past session. It did not get fully heard by committees and did not pass. So that's one thing we're working on locally. In addition to appointing me as chief heat officer last spring, our mayor, Daniela Levine Cavo, wanted to make sure that we engaged our full stakeholders and communities through appointing a climate and heat health task force, which we've set up through the Miami Foundation as part of our Resilient 305 partnership. And we have representatives in this image here. That's Dr. Cheryl Holder. She is a internal medicine physician that has worked in vulnerable communities her whole career and trained other healthcare practitioners to do the same. And she is a co-founder of the Florida Clinicians for Climate Action. She's been a big advocate because of the risks that she was seeing in her populations, particularly related to heat and their housing situation and their workplaces. This website includes all of our PowerPoints and notes from the 6 public workshops that we've recently held to engage our university partners, community-based partners, municipal partners, as well as county staff in how do we best address both managing heat and mitigating our urban heat. And through that, we just wrapped up our last one earlier this week, and we'll be working with the 15-member task force to prioritize actions in each of those areas. And I'll start talking about some of those areas shortly. Prior to doing that, I wanted to make sure we could sort of get a lay of the land about what's already happening to address heat, and there is a lot, and how other communities have done it, and create a framework. So as we went into these public workshops, everyone was coming in with the same on a level playing field in terms of knowing what best practices are and what the framework of looking at how to address heat from a natural infrastructure, from any kind of housing, cool pavements, shaded bus stops, improved streetscapes, and then from a communications and engagement standpoint. We also launched last summer an initial public awareness campaign through social media. These posts are in partnership with the R-Struck Resilience Center, and really these are designed for any city to take them on and promote the issues. Our mayor engaged, I think, 15 other cities in the country to also create a heat season campaign through this social media. We've been educating through a resilience pod. It's a portable pod that has solar and energy backup that we've been distributing fruit trees and food during COVID, and also using it to educate people about resilience, including heat. We created posters in our 3 main languages spoken in Miami and posted them throughout our public libraries, parks, public safety facilities, etc., and partnered with the National Weather Service on their daily hazard reports and their social media posting, because they're a very powerful partner. All our television and radio weather reporters depend on the National Weather Service for the messaging that they get out. And we're continuing that dialogue with them. And then we worked with our parks, who have summer camps in 30 parks throughout the county, on lesson plans for the kids and getting feedback for what they do to manage heat. That was a lot of fun. This year, we're upping our game on our heat season education outreach on the level that we do here locally, and I'm sure you do in Lee County, of hurricane preparedness. And so we're partnering very strongly, closely with our Office of Emergency Management on that to further distribute not only posters, but magnets with QR codes and wallet cards, and creating, as part of their outreach in their PowerPoints, education about heat response. We're going to have a big kickoff on May 2nd for the heat season that going to run through October 31st. And really looking to target, in terms of bus stop ads and buses, those locations that we've determined through our heat vulnerability assessment are the most likely to have heat-related illnesses that have a higher vulnerability index. And working through our partners, and I think I mentioned most of this. We are, as I mentioned, having another level of conversations with the National Weather Service now, using health-informed data to readdress the thresholds at which they send out different advisories to people, because in the past, they did not send out a heat advisory or warning until we had a heat index of 108 or 113. And we know the vast majority of heat-related illnesses and deaths happen at much lower temperatures. So right now we're working with them on having different messaging at heat indexes in the 90s, and then at 100, 105, and then the more extreme. So that's going well. We're looking at doing some trainings with our partners on healthcare, with healthcare practitioners. I mentioned earlier that we're working with both our county Office of Emergency Management and our school district on making sure our shelters have the capacity to stay cool in the event of a widespread power outage. And with our Citizen Emergency Response Team volunteers training, we've created an enhancement education tool, both for the initial training, but also for veteran volunteers to come back for enrichment training, and giving them heat response toolkits of ice packs, electrolytes, a thermometer, cooling towels, different things that they can use in the event of needing to treat people, and using them to come out to various athletic events and large festivals where we typically have heat-related illnesses. We're also additionally partnering, I think I've mentioned this organization a couple of times, but the Adrienne Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center was part of the initial inspiration of creating my position. And since then, they've been helping other cities create chief heat officers. We now have chief heat officers in Sierra Leone, in Athens, Greece, in Santiago, Chile, in Phoenix, Arizona. Soon you will hear about chief heat officers in Monterrey, Mexico, and in Los Angeles. So it is becoming something that people recognize as an important role to play in local government, to coordinate activities amongst the various departments that need to be engaged, and community partners that need to be engaged on both heat management and mitigation. And one of those is the Adrienne Arsht Resilience Center is helping us with a countywide plan for resilience hubs. We have already identified cooling centers in our parks and our libraries, but again, they don't have backup power. And so if we had that widespread power, but these are trusted community facilities that people are already using, and we could provide year-round programming to enhance community resilience, including to extreme heat, but not exclusive of that. And this would be a place that in the event of a power outage, people could walk to, cool off, get, access to ice and water, food, access to services, charge their phone, and generally it also find how they can help their neighbors. So That's on the emergency public education and emergency management side. Another piece of this work is related to housing and our energy burden. So we've been mapping those households in the county that are most energy burdened and are looking for ways to address that. The city of Miami and Miami Beach already have zoning ordinances requiring cool roofs. Just a reflective roof can significantly save on your utility costs, can really improve the efficiency. Our county is reluctant to do that, make requirements at the building level without engaging our statewide building code. So as we get it, so they're looking at a requirement for cool roofs on the commercial building. When we get to advocacy for that, we will circle back with our League of Women Voters for assistance on that front. We started in Miami when I was CRO, a program called Keep Safe Miami that does provides multifamily housing developments with tools on how to assess what they would need to protect their property from flooding, heat, all climate and weather related disasters, and improve efficiency, and provides them guidance on financing. That program recently received funding to go statewide, and they've begun outreach in various other counties. Is now called Keep Safe Florida. We've worked locally with various nonprofit partners and the Florida Community Loan Fund to create a revolving loan fund for smaller, naturally occurring affordable houses. These are some of those garden apartments that may be 20 units that are older, maybe wall units of air conditioning to help them retrofit their properties and preserve those as affordable housing. And then on the single family side, we're working with our community affairs department that manages the federally funded weatherization program and the utility assistance program, LWVLee, to expand the measures that could be used with those programs. And our nonprofit partners are so critical in helping to achieve our goals. I mentioned earlier that a group of community-based organizations had done focus groups and interviews in our lower income and marginalized communities and found that extreme heat was one of their top two concerns related to climate change. The other one was climate gentrification. But they are working together on advocacy around requiring all landlords provide windows that can be opened with screens, and that we expand our weatherization provisions to include efficient air conditioning and LWVLee programs. Clio Institute and Boat Solar were successful last August in the negotiations with Florida Power and Light's rate paying negotiation to prevent, they're no longer allowed to shut off power for any residents that haven't been able to pay if our temperatures rise to 95 degrees. Some people are working on, ownership, community land trust, redevelopment, and others are community development finance organizations, both SELF, which is Solar and Energy Loan Fund, and that is a statewide group, is providing low-income financing, financing for low to moderate income families. That is favorable financing for energy efficiency retrofits and solar. And Neighborhood Housing Services of South Florida, which covers Broward and Miami-Dade and Florida Keys, is providing similar energy efficiency financing. I mentioned partnerships with the universities. This summer, we're going to have over 100 volunteer residents from AC insecure without AC homes to have sensors in their homes and report on their physical and mental health responses to the weather patterns so that we can get a better handle on what the issues are of extreme heat in home. The University of Miami also has a mapping affordability project, which historically is focused on really helping us to understand what the issues are with creating new units for affordable housing and preserving those that we have. Now they're including a layer, including a layer of which ones are energy burdened and need to prioritize addressing heat. That research should be completed by the end of this year. We're partnered with We Count, which is an agricultural worker organization locally on advocating for outdoor worker policy. Since the state legislation did not move forward this past session, we're now exploring what we can do at the county level. And the last area that we're very focused on is our tree canopy and targeting those areas with less than 20%. Our goal countywide is to get to an average of 30%, but by really upping our tree, enhancing in our tree canopy as much as possible in those neighborhoods with less than 20%. This is challenging because those neighborhoods have a lot of pavement, it's high density, it's not easy to place trees, and you want to make sure it's the right tree in the right place in terms of that it's going to grow well, that it's not going to blow over in a hurricane or impact a utility line with its growth. And we have good codes. However, at the state level, a couple of years ago in 2019, passed a law where any property owner can have a tree removed if they have a letter from an arborist that it's going to present a risk to human safety or property without any having to pay a permit or fee or replace that lost tree. And so that has made it so it's been very easy for people to remove trees on their properties and on the right of way in front of their properties. We have a lot of interest in improving our greenways and making it easier for pedestrians, easier for transit riders and bicyclists to be safe and be able to move around. So one of those programs is replacing trees. We've upped our finances for that. We also have an Adopt a Tree program where we've given away over 200,000 trees since in the last 20 years. We have more of those events coming up, as well as planning on different other institutional like school properties. We have a community-wide program that seeks corporate sponsors, private sponsors to plant 1 million trees and get to that tree canopy goal. And most of those are planted in parks, but they also do tree giveaways and garden giveaways as well. And again, we have another partnership with Florida International University to place sensors in our urban environments and get a better understanding in the microclimates of what that heat and humidity looks like compared to what is being read at the National Weather Service stations. And we're finding very big differences. It can be, over a heat index of over 10 degrees. So, there may be times when there's no heat warning happening, and yet in certain neighborhoods, they're experiencing well over heat indices of over 105, and it's not known. So we're really trying to up our game and look at all the opportunities we have to preserve and enhance our tree canopy. And it's interesting, both the housing retrofit work and the tree canopy work have the co-benefits of reducing our carbon emissions or reducing or absorbing carbon and making us more safe in the long run and reducing costs for people in terms of cooling and providing local jobs. So these are win-win types of solutions. They do cost money, but they save money in the long run, and they save on health costs significantly. So these are just some images from some of the tree planting efforts. This is my contact information in case anyone's interested in following up. The Miami Heat have also been great, excited about my new role, and sent me my own personalized jersey. And the newsletter, we have a monthly newsletter, Miami-Dade.gov Resilience, that you can learn more as we go forward. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing so that we can have some quality dialogue.
Thank you so much, Jane. That was wonderful. And my question to you was going to be, what can we do? And you've answered that. We can advocate, we can support legislation, we can create legislation, and
yeah, I think on the policy front, legislation around the built environment, the cool roofs, efficient homes, weatherization, those kinds of things, and then on the good tree policies, both preservation and enhancement policies. A mature tree provides so much more benefits in terms of both heat mitigation and carbon sequestration than a newly planted tree. And protection of our outdoor workers. Those are some of the highest priorities that we need to be advocating for.
And that's something that we as an organization can certainly advocate for and go out and work for. Let's take a look at some messages here. And from Val, I'm disappointed to see that in Central Florida, the trend today is to have a house painted black with a black roof. It's hard to believe that people in Florida do not understand the tragic impact on all of us for this decision to have black homes and roofs.
Yeah.
Yes.
I saw a black house in my neighborhood, and I was I read recently a study that dark walls are actually reduce your efficiency of your home even more. The roofs do reduce your heat load on your home, but they do more also on reducing the urban heat island. The walls are the most important to keep your house cool, to have cool colors on your, and it's cheap, it's just it's a paint color. It's not expensive. And yet because of there's typically less insulation between the walls, and it's also right where the ambient air is, your head level. And so it's really important that your walls are cool. So
thank you.
Support for a statewide cool roof ordinance. Maybe we could even build.
We can do that. We can
walls.
do that. Yes. Yeah. Oh, here is a question from Dr. Doreen DuPont. From the viewpoint of heat risk, is it better for us to be adjusting our clocks or not? Interesting question.
Yeah, that's I hadn't thought through that. I saw that question, and I thought, boy, that's the first time I've heard that. Well, obviously it's a new thing, but I don't have an easy answer. It depends on how if people adjust their lifestyles as a result of that change. And I'm not sure they would. But, I didn't mention on the urban heat island, we do also have increased temperatures urban because of waste heat, both from the air conditioning systems and from internal combustion car engines. So again, importance of the co-benefits of going EV, of having more efficient air conditioning. It can reduce our carbon emissions and make us safer.
Okay, thank you. Can you describe any state level initiatives to mitigate heat risk from Ellen Ballard?
So yes, I mentioned a couple. One was the outdoor worker policy that unfortunately did not get moved through full committees to be fully heard by the state legislature this last session. But, you know, it's interesting. We did 2 years ago pass requirements for all high school athletes to take an education course around heat risk and to have on-site response, heat response for football teams, soccer teams, et cetera. And yet we can't protect our workers. And so I think that's sort of the argument that we're taking is this was non-enforceable. That wasn't going to hurt business in any way, but to have that. So I think that's very important. I think once we get this cool roof, proposed cool roof ordinance at the state building code to the level that that they're ready for public input, we want to reach out to you for advocacy on that level. But you can advocate for it now, and you know, the more we get, again, that's something that's low cost to the property owners and provides huge benefits both to their residents and to the surrounding community. I think any statewide legislation to expand weatherization programs and expand energy efficiency retrofit programs through our utilities. We have some of the lowest requirements for energy efficiency programs with our utilities in the country. And so we should be promoting more of that.
You mentioned, I would like to just follow up, you mentioned that some of the initiatives this year as far as legislation failed. And I'm wondering why did that happen? Just basically not enough support, or was there an anti-campaign involved?
I think there was a quiet anti-campaign involved. It was not public. It was from powerful forces that were quietly having conversations behind the scenes.
So there is opposition that.
I think large employers of outdoor workers were a little nervous about increased liability. The fact is they have liability now. They have to protect their workers overall. And there's already been citations from OSHA when employers been negligent on heat-related illness and death. So I really don't think that this would, that what was proposed was non-enforceable, to be honest. It was just saying you need to provide training, you need to provide water, you need to provide access to a place to cool down and rest when heat indices reach a certain level. Not a huge heavy lift for, and they will save in the long run on workers' comp and on lost work time. So those, I think there was some misinformation or, you know, concern that shouldn't have come up. I want to address Cindy Cummins' question.
Yes.
I think it's a very important one around our homeless residents, because they are, and I didn't mention it, but they are in that no access to AC, of course, population. And our emergency management actually historically has had a good system when heat indices get up to a certain level to reach out to the homeless one by one and make sure they have water, cool down, and get into a cool space, into a shelter. But I think we need to look at the thresholds again as to when they start doing that outreach locally. And our emergency management's open to looking at that. I'm sort of trying to work together with our National Weather Service on those advisories to trigger when those get triggered. But I think that's really what needs to happen with the homeless. Is there needs to be, there's no better way than on the feet on the ground to make sure they have access to water and cooling spaces. Often the home, particularly the more chronic homeless, won't go inside to spaces. They're not comfortable, but if you can at least make sure they can get to a shaded space and have access to water, you can keep them.
And I guess that issue relates directly to affordable housing issues as well.
Yes, of course. Yes. Which
And,
we're all struggling with here in Florida.
Yes, and it follows along the same lines you mentioned of following some of the preparedness for hurricanes. I know that on the Broward County Climate Change Task Force that I sit on, we're always looking at ways of engaging the community to help them go into the community and inform people and work with them. And this is exactly a situation that we could, work with people in the community leaders to work on these types of issues and go forward. So I think that's a very important issue that we have to address. I know that our president of the League of Florida, Cecile Schoon, was very, very involved in working with homeless after Hurricane Michael up in the Panhandle. And this is exactly a similar situation. This is the same thing relating to the heat index. And I myself, as far as outdoor workers, I've often looked at houses being built in sweltering, unimaginable heat and seen workers on roofs with hot tar. And I mean, aside from the intense heat, the fumes, those carcinogenic fumes, I wonder what their mortality rates is. And that sort of brings me into another question, which was that thanks to you, I did have that link, and I did search the CDC query for heat and heat-related illnesses in the state of Florida for a 5-year period. And I only came upon one hit, and that was Broward County, where the statistic of 25 came up, and the rest of the state, the data was categorized as quote unquote suppressed. And so clearly this statistic is being underreported. Yeah. So I wondered, well, immediately, who do we go to fix that? And so I wonder who is responsible for gathering statistics like that and reporting it to the CDC?
The State Department of Health.
The State Department of Health. Okay. Let me just make a note on that. Is there a reason that you think that it is underreported? Is it intentional, a mistake?
I don't know if it's intentional. What I will say is that historically, it's been underreported in communities for a number of reasons, because heat-related illnesses are often, if someone faints or they have a heart attack, but they wouldn't have had a heart attack if they weren't exposed to the heat. They might have been a worker that fell off a ladder because they were feeling faint. But what's reported is the injury of falling off the ladder. What's reported is the heart attack. What's reported is just syncope, fainting, and not heat. So that's part of it. The other part on deaths is the only way they could document a heat-related death is if at the time of discovery of the body temperature is over 104. And a dead body cools very quickly. So if you're not taking that temperature right at the time of death, you're not going to be documenting a heat-related death.
Mm-hmm. I see a comment from Ellen Ballard. When COVID data is suppressed by the Florida Department of Health, it's unlikely that heat-related illnesses, more difficult data to collect, will be much more challenging.
Yeah. I think the statewide, though, from that tracker, the last I saw, the statewide heat-related illnesses that was reported was slightly over 6,800 cases.
Well,
So-
it's a very unique tool, and I posted the link, courtesy of your providing it, at the top
Yeah.
of the chat room, and I would encourage people to go on and play around with it and put in different locations and different criteria to see what comes up. But it is very fascinating. Along those lines, in terms of geography, you're the first on a number of issues of being a CHO. Is there any other interest in the state of Florida by municipalities to do this?
Well, certainly, I think, you attended the Southeast Florida Climate Change Compact
Mhm.
Summit. There was a lot of interest in our Southeast municipalities, the other counties. They then had me present at their summit that year around heat. So there is a good amount. I just spoke yesterday with the Florida Housing Coalition because of their statewide interest in how heat is impacting on that utility burden piece of this and risks with affordable housing. So I think there is statewide interest, and certainly, we did see that attempt to have statewide legislation on outdoor workers, at least, and there was some interest, but we need some more bipartisan support for things like that.
I'd like to read Val Mobley's comment, and thank you to Lee County for hosting this topic, and thank you to Jane for sharing your expertise. Certainly is fascinating to find out what's going on and to see you at the helm of it. So I hope you will keep us informed. I do want to note that Jane was interviewed recently by Time Magazine, and I felt it was a fascinating article. I guess I should put that link up for you, but do you want to tell us a little bit about that article and some of the information in it?
Well, I think a lot of it you've heard today, or
Mhm.
you've probably heard even more depth than that article will present. But I think that and I felt like that reporter did a very good job, and I don't say that about all reporters, but she did a very good job of saying how this is an emerging issue, that sea level rise and flooding is something, the impacts when we think about climate adaptation, those are some of the first things, or forest fires and hurricanes. Those are some of the things that come to mind. And extreme heat is something that's becoming more and more of an issue to cities, globally. So I think, and particularly impacting our lower income and more vulnerable populations the most. So I think that was really the angle that she took with that talk, and how climate change isn't this like far off, we have to worry about impacts for the next generation. It's actually happening now, and it's going to get worse, yes, but we need to take action to both reduce carbon emissions and protect ourselves now.
Well, I found it quite interesting, and you mentioned that she also, and you discussed the more global situation, and she wrote that the heat officer role will soon be adopted by Athens, Greece, and Sierra Leone, which
has happened.
Oh, did it?
That's already happened, and we've had now have a chief heat officer also in Santiago, Chile, and one in Phoenix, Arizona, and then the City Council for Los Angeles has committed to hiring one, and it sounds to me, I've heard that Monterrey, Mexico will soon be appointing one, and I've had inquiries from other cities, several other cities, asking, wanting to just learn more about the position. and see if that makes sense for their cities. Not every city can afford another position,
Yeah,
but I'm hoping, and the federal government's taken a lot of interest in heat. They've formed an interagency task force that includes NOAA, CDC, EPA, HUD to address heat. So OSHA is within CDC. So and the Labor Department. I think I'm not sure if it's in both or one.
I see.
But, so I think there is increasing awareness and interest in addressing these issues, for sure.
Well, I want to thank you. I don't know if anyone has any other questions, if they'd like to post.
There's
Just one more in the chat from Ann Schmidt. Thank you
Yeah.
for your very informative talk. You had a very nice slide comparing median income and tree canopy. What tool did you use to determine urban tree canopy?
So we actually hired a researcher out of the University of Florida to do a full tree canopy assessment for us to look at tree canopy, land surface temperature, and actually compare our tree canopy with 5 years earlier. Through that, we learned that we've just been able to stay steady at 20%, which is disconcerting over the last 5 years, although with tree losses of hurricanes and with the rapid development that we've had here over that time, you know, staying flat isn't terrible, but it's not where we want to be. But Anne, I would encourage you, American Forests, it's a national nonprofit, recently put out a tree equity score that's easily accessible for anybody. So I think that is the best universal tool that's out there.
As leaguers, we know that we can take this information and we don't need a specific directive, but we can go to our local municipalities and to their council meetings and start asking questions about extreme heat and what they're doing.
I would ask about how are they looking at their tree canopy and and equity as it relates to urban heat islands in terms of enhancing and preserving tree canopy in those areas where it's lowest. I would ask about housing retrofit programs. Cindy mentioned services to the homeless, particularly during extreme heat. I think that's a very important thing to make them responsive to.
Yes.
What do we do if we have an extreme heat event in the event of an extended and widespread power outage? You want them to have their plan.
Yes.
Jasmine has her hand up. Can we call on her?
Yes. Jasmine?
Sorry, I was just clapping.
Oh. Okay.
Well, thank you, Jasmine. Thank you for that. And I see Ricky has also made a comment. So informative. Thank you to Lee County and thank you to Jane. And I will echo that and thank you as well. And hope that you'll keep us informed of if you need us to take action on anything. And maybe you can come back and update us in the future. So thank you again for being with us today.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you all for your attention on these issues. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks to
And
both
now-
Adrian. Thanks to both Adrian and Jane for an excellent presentation. And I would like to invite all the non-members who were here this morning to join the League of Women Voters of Lee County. We'd be happy to have you. If there's nothing more to say, I think we will adjourn. I have one question, but I don't really need an answer. Who paints their house black? No answer needed. Thank you all for joining us. Goodbye.
I just would like to, I don't know if anybody saw Sandy Frank's remark, but along with what Sarah is saying, to everybody who's not a league member, please sign up for at our website for Lee County email updates, and I'm sure you'll find we have a plethora of activities that you can become involved with, and you might be able to come and bring some of your own issues. So thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.